Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Matthew Dickerson. Tech Talk. Tech Talk. Sit back and relax. It's time to talk technology.
Greetings, 2025ers, and a big old Happy New Year to you all. I don't think 2 or 3 weeks in is too deep into the year for that sort of well-wishing. And just to allay any doubt, I'm going to double down and do it all again. Happy New Year to you and your family. Welcome back to a brand new run of our happy little podcast as we crack the seal on Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson, 2025 style. And here, in full Technicolor with fully workable joints, is a freshly unboxed Matthew Dickerson. Welcome to the microphone, Matt.
I do have a philosophical problem here. How long can you say Happy New Year for? And I've said that to people before, and they've said, oh, well, if I haven't seen you so far this year, then it's fair game, Happy New Year. And I said, so if you haven't seen me till June, is that okay? Oh, no, that's silly. Okay,
that's
so
a thing, yeah.
There's got to be a limit. So I get it. The first time I see you for the year, this is the first time we've seen each other. Happy New Year. First time we've talked to our listeners live, kind of. Happy New Year. But what about if it was February? What if it was March? There's got to be a cutoff.
There's a cutoff. And I reckon, it starts to get awkward about 2 or 3 weeks in, I reckon.
Yeah. So when people are listening to this, it's just getting that awkward stage, I think.
But, I mean, Merry Christmas. Can you say Merry Christmas on Boxing Day?
Oh, gee, what about if we are having our Christmas Day because the family can't make it together on Christmas Day? On Boxing Day, do we say Merry Boxing Day? So the day's gone. It's as soon as the day's finished, surely that's gone then. Yeah. And we start looking for...
Oh, look, and people have Christmas in July celebrations. Do you show up and say Merry Christmas then?
Oh, now you're confusing it.
Yeah, no, I'd say no. A flat no.
So we need the International Standards Authority to come up with the number of days before you're allowed to stop saying Happy New Year. There's got to be a limit. We can't have it open-ended.
There's got to be a limit, and we can attach an SI data unit too as well. It's not necessarily
obviously,
in days.
We need that, definitely, yeah. So now I want to put my tail between my legs and run away. I've been humbled over Christmas. I did give you a present, the Power Up paper plane, which is obviously a powered plane.
Thank you. I sense what's coming here. Yes, thank you.
And the challenge was set to see who could fly it either the longest distance or the longest time, because they're a bit of a challenge to fly because it is a paper plane still.
That's right. Yeah.
But they're powered. So I took mine in my backyard, had the kids around. We gathered to send the message clearly to you that we were the superior paper planers, and we got a good run out of it. I think I did about a 19-second run, sent the video off to you proudly to say, take that, James, but you came back.
The gauntlet was thrown down. Yes, look, I had the luxury of having access to a school playground, so we snuck over the back fence and we had a big open oval, and so, I was able to send my plane a good, I reckon nearly went 100 metres. Well, it wouldn't have been 100 metres, but, close to, and it was 27 seconds in the air.
The 27, and we went out and we kept trying to beat the 27 seconds.
But we found that it lost contact with my mobile phone pretty soon after launching. So we're running after this thing, trying to steer it, trying to do something with it.
Trying to steer it was a challenge, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They were good fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
But a bit of the limitation, and I'm not putting this up as an excuse, but we did have a few trees around us, and I saw your video, and I think that was a secret. The lack of trees was certainly a secret.
Oh, absolutely. There's less worry.
Because it
but
did
I did have school buildings
that
I was worried about. I didn't want to have to climb up a building to get something off the roof.
That's right. And the kids would have come back this year and said, look at this on the roof, we'll go and get that. Because it doesn't matter if the paper part of the plane got destroyed by a bit of rain. You could just get another bit of paper and fold a new one. So that was a lot of fun. So I'm glad you accepted the challenge. I'm not glad that you beat me.
Thank you for the gift. Yeah. And look, I don't think it's over. It's really over. I reckon 27 seconds is only a start. I reckon this thing could go on forever.
I know. I've been practicing. Don't worry.
So, I just need to refine how I steer it and using the little paper rudder as well.
Yeah. The steering was a challenge, wasn't it?
But I reckon this could go for minutes, if not hours.
Till the battery goes flat.
All right, well, folks, we're bursting into 2025 with a grab bag full of tech and science goodies. For those of you who love an upgrade on a retro classic, we've got a story on how VW have souped up their Kombis for the next quarter of the 21st century. We've got a digital solution for all our listeners who suffer from motion sickness today, and in light of a minor social media storm in the teacup, we'll take a bit of a reality check on EVs as potential fire hazards. But more of that later. Let's get fitted out with our first story for the year. The hunt is on in 2025 for creative sources of energy supply, folks. Clever scientists have their eyes peeled, looking for how energy transfers and transforms within systems and where it is lost to the environment. Now, if we can just catch that energy in whatever form and convert it into electricity to be used once again, well, that, folks, that's efficiency in a nutshell. And Matt, all the heat we constantly shed from our bodies need go to waste no longer.
And we do generate heat, obviously, and we're burning our food and creating all that heat. So can we do something with it? And so some clever researchers from the Queensland University of Technology have actually looked at some work that's been done by the University of Washington, and then they've kind of added to it, as happens now. And can you imagine what the scientists from 400 years ago might have been able to do if they could share information around the world almost instantly? And that's the ability scientists have got now. So they're converting body heat into electricity and basically looking at the temperature difference. So we know our bodies sit around 38 degrees Celsius, and the outside air, apart from summer in some parts of Australia, the outside air is not normally 38 degrees Celsius. But even if it is 38 degrees Celsius outside, it's unusual for that to be the temperature inside. You'd be very uncomfortable if it was. So having that temperature differential, the greater that temperature differential between our body and the surrounding air, the more electricity we can produce. Now, we're not going to power the grid with this. What we are going to be able to power, though, are some wearable electronics. So fitness bands, smartwatches, medical devices, and I think that's the area that will really see some major changes.
Small, low-power devices that would have had a battery otherwise.
And they would still have a battery, I would think, logically, but a battery that in the past we might have had to remove to charge up or take that device and put it on something to charge up. And I'm thinking of people with diabetes, for example, that might have a device that might be an automatic insulin injector, but you still need to charge it up somehow. Having some way of being able to keep that charge. So there'd be a battery there, but it just isn't charged up from power from the power point.
Maybe the shirt you're wearing just charges that battery down a little bit slower. You know, it enables a little bit extra longer life.
Yeah, so I don't see this being used to help heat us if we're in a cold environment, because I can't imagine you'd get enough temperature, enough electricity out of this to actually heat.
But you can't. Yeah, you can't create energy.
Right,
is the thing. So it's a law of conservation of energy. We will lose energy to the environment, but we won't be able to get more energy, electricity out of our body heat.
Yeah, and so we're not going to be able to heat ourselves up to the extent that you might go, we'll put on that jacket and it's self-heating, as maybe someone will come up with a marketing term for that, but it won't work. But for things that don't take much power, then I think this is fantastic. Now, when the University of Washington did some work with this, they actually had a little thermoelectric device that powered an LED light, and it was only being powered, no battery in it, only being powered by the heat differential. Small light, small amount of power, and again, they had a large thermoelectric device. So it was proven just to demonstrate, look, we've got a light turning on from no other power source but the heat your body's generating. And coming back to that conservation of energy, people think, well, this is power for nothing, but our body's doing the work. Our body is taking the fuel.
So you've got the food, that we've converted into energy to heat our bodies, and then our bodies are losing that heat, so we've got to catch some of that heat to turn it into electricity.
Yeah, so very clever. And one of my things, I'll talk about at the end of the show, just a few of my predictions that I've got for this upcoming tech year. One of them is really around wearables, to see what we'll do with wearables. Wearables are going to become a much more important facet of our overall health situation. And we're going to need power to do that. So rather than have a bunch of batteries and a bunch of recharging, something like this might be incredibly important.
Now, there's a lot being passed around social media platforms about EV battery fires. For many who are EV hesitant, or even resistant, shall I say, the simple act of charging an EV is a source of fear and alarm. So much so that more and more Strata owners are actually banning the charging of EV cars in their car parks. Matt, lithium-ion battery fires are really a challenge to put out. We know that, but just how dangerous is the act of charging EVs in reality? If
Strata owners, and probably not Strata owners, the management team, the group that you have in terms of a Strata on a building, if they're going to ban EVs, they should be banning petrol cars, because it's just as likely that you have a petrol car fire as you do an electric vehicle fire. Now, the problem you mentioned there in terms of how hot a lithium-ion fire burns is an issue without a doubt, but just banning EVs because they saw something on the internet, which is, I'm sure it happens.
Yeah, it's a paranoia that's being fed, isn't it?
It is. And to give you some data to help back you up if you are in a situation where you can't charge your car in an underground car park, there are approximately 40 million EVs out there on the roads at the moment. From 2010, and granted there weren't a lot of EVs around 2010, but from 2010 to the end of 2024, there were 580 confirmed EV battery fires, but of those, only 15% occurred while charging. For example, some occurred in an accident.
Right.
Just the same as when sometimes a petrol car has an accident, the petrol tank is ruptured and there might be something hot or a spark and that causes a fire. Sometimes that will happen with electric vehicle as well. So you're not going to suddenly solve all fires of vehicles because you've got a battery in there, but only 15% of those occurred while charging.
Well, I wonder what the comparison would be if we looked at petrol station fires. Now, in Australia, you have to hold onto the nozzle as you're pouring the petrol into the car, and you can't let go of that. There used to be little catches and stuff, but I think in the States they still have those.
Right.
And consequently, when people get in and out of their car with the petrol still pumping, when they go to touch it again, any static electricity they might have generated can create a spark, and bang, you've got yourself a fire when the fumes ignite. So I wonder how the number of EV fires compares to the number of petrol station fires.
That's right.
That occur in the States.
And when you break that down, that means that over 14 years there have been and this is worldwide, 87 EV fires while charging. That's 6 a year worldwide.
Worldwide, right.
And I would love to investigate all 87 of those to see exactly the circumstances around those, what happened. A bit like you say with a petrol station fire, well, how did that happen? Well, the guy did this or had a problem with his door where it was jamming and as he slammed it created a spark or whatever. There'd be some logical reasons to why those
that's
are
right.
happening.
And so there'll be some sort of logic behind the fires in the EV chargers. And I wonder, what damage to the outlets or the plugs to the car themselves.
And I don't have data to back it up, but certainly I've seen research to show that when you do have an accident, a petrol car accident versus a EV accident, you do often get fuel leakage. So you can have fuel leaking down the road, and then it doesn't take much for that to cause a fire. Now, again, granted, the EV fire will burn hotter and very difficult to put out. You can't just go and put some water on it. But a good petrol fire is hard to put out with a bit of water as well. If you've got a petrol fire that goes to a petrol tank, you could get an explosion. Now, you don't get an explosion with an EV fire, but you just get it burning hot for a long period of time.
Yeah, and I've witnessed an LPG fire too in the back of a car as well.
Wow.
That was pretty frightening and very difficult for the people who were trying to handle that. But how many of these EV fires have occurred in Australia?
Yeah, so you've only had ever 9 EV battery fires in Australia.
Right.
And 1 was when a car was charging.
Right.
So for people in a strata management situation to say, right, blanket, that's it, you can't charge your car, you can't have a charger, all the rest of it, because of this fear, again, it'd be like saying, I saw a plane accident, that's it, ground all planes. Yeah. Yes, plane accidents happen, but it's very unlikely, and we're much safer, as we all know, flying than we are driving. But again, it looks bad when we see a plane accident on a YouTube clip or on Facebook. Right. Same with an EV fire, it looks bad.
But the other thing is EVs are still, you'd have to regard EVs as being new on the scene.
Yeah, that's right. And new is scary.
Yeah. And
people see things with new and they go, well, I don't know or understand, therefore let's just not do it. So Fire and Rescue New South Wales has said that EV charging is better off to occur in open air spaces or in car parks with automatic sprinkler systems. Now, most underground car parks would have an automatic sprinkler system. So that kind of solves that problem. And what you're trying to stop is if that one fire happens in one car, then let's isolate it to there. And a sprinkler system would effectively do that because everywhere else in the car park would be wet. It would be unlikely for that to spread to everywhere else in the car park, for example. So it is, I suppose, a fear factor, but one that we probably need, as we talk about often on this podcast, some legislation. The National Construction Code doesn't require any upgrades at the moment, but maybe if there was something in the construction code and there was some legislation being talked about in New South Wales, a right to charge legislation. But after the 2023 election, there was a change of government and that tended to stall, or maybe a new government didn't have the same emphasis on that. But I think that would be relevant because I did see one story where someone was banned from charging her Tesla Model 3 just in an all PowerPoint. Now, I imagine that most people would be concerned about fast charging or supercharging, but in a car park with fast chargers. But a normal power point.
Normal power points is almost a trickle charge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. 10 amps you're talking about from a normal power point, maybe a 15 amp power point they had. But this has been an issue, and I've talked to some people. I actually helped write a paper for one particular person who needed to get some message through to their Strata management. They were not so much concerned about the fires in their car park, but the incredible cost of charging. Yeah. So they wanted to have separate metering set up for this particular person in the car park. Now you can imagine going to your electricity provider saying, I know you've got all the meters over there and on each unit in this apartment block, but now we want some metering downstairs attached to that one upstairs, and that sounds all too complicated. I mean,
well, expensive too. So you can get that hooked up and then realise that you're really getting you're charging this person an extra 40 cents a day or something.
That's right. And I've done the calculation in my car, and I reckon it takes about $8. I use off-peak to charge, or you can use solar as well, but about $8 to fully charge.
Fully charge.
That's right.
But we're talking about someone who's plugging in and giving themselves a 10%, 20%
Correct.
top
That's
up.
Right.
Yeah.
So even if I had to fully charge every week, that would be maybe $8. But depending on what you're doing, I mean, that would be unlikely, you would think, for the amount there. So it's certainly something that we've got to get our heads wrapped around. It's certainly something that's a problem for some people. This is stopping some people from buying an electric vehicle because they want to work out where they can charge. And if they've got to go to a supercharger all the time and charge, well, it's a bit inconvenient. And one of the things I love about an electric vehicle is the convenience of charging up at home. I don't have to go to a petrol station. Fantastic. So it is a bit of a problem. But the other one that I thought was interesting is in the UK, there was a fire at Luton Airport, and this was, again, blamed on EVs, because obviously EVs would start every car park fire. When they actually finally did the research on that, they actually found a diesel car had started that one. But, of course, no one talks about that because that's okay for a diesel car to start it.
Yeah, and the way that information operates now is that we've got data, but then we've got the feels, and feels trumps data every time, unfortunately. So when the message gets out that was an EV fire that started it, and someone else says, oh, hang on, no, I think it was diesel, can you check your facts? People go, yeah, but it feels like it was an EV that started it. And that's what's floating in the back of their mind. And the actual fact matters less. And this is a concern, I think.
And sometimes the first headline is the one you remember.
Bingo, yeah.
And you don't normally see a headline that says, whoops, we got that wrong. It was actually a diesel fire.
The retraction will occur on page 11
That's
in
right.
the bottom left corner, yeah. Now here's a story for the classic car lovers. Everything old is new again, and if you love a VW Kombi, then get ready for its 2025 EV makeover. Volkswagen's new ID Buzz pays homage, shall I say with an accent, to the classic family bus of the 60s, the Come Surfers van of the 70s, the Come Hipster touring mode of the 2000s. 2025 ID Buzz has a slightly sleeker design than the Kombi, minus the rattly, oily engine, but Matt, it's still faithful to that classic retro Kombi feel.
It still sounds funny when you say 2025. I keep forgetting we're in 2025 already.
We've entered the next quarter of the 21st century.
We have. So to be correct here, the good old Kombi was the VW Type 2. Their Beetle was their Type 1 vehicle, and then the Kombi was Type 2. Somewhere along the lines, marketers came up with the idea that Type 2 wasn't really that exciting to market a car with, so they came up with the Kombi name. Now, one of the stories I used to love about the Kombi, and I heard this from my brother. My brother owned a Kombi when he was older than me, and I was growing up, and I used to be able to get in the Kombi every now and again, if I was really lucky and was a really good little brother. And the story was that as he drove around, he'd always give a wave to other Kombi drivers. And he told me the story that in the manual of Kombis, it said wave to other Kombi drivers. and that stuck in my mind. And I spoke.
Always make sure you wave.
That's right.
That's in the rules.
I spoke to other Kombi drivers who told me that absolutely this was in the manual, and I just accepted it as fact. A few years ago, I had to do a story, and I was going to use that. And went, I like to make sure that my stories are accurate. I went back and got about 10 different manuals, found them online, and found these manuals there and searched everywhere for about waving to other Kombi drivers.
And it wasn't there.
Not there. just a wonderful urban myth.
It was it was a wives' tale.
I almost felt disappointed in myself for researching it because I love the idea that as you drove your Kombi, you go, there's another Kombi driver, give him a little wave.
Yes, and if you didn't wave, then you were scowled, you were frowned upon. You weren't a real Kombi driver.
And you hadn't read the manual, obviously. So the Kombis were fantastic, but they were slow. Now, the original Kombi that came out in 1949 produced all of 18 kilowatts. So it wasn't that powerful. Now, that was probably only just enough power to drive the Kombi van empty. But then, of course, you load it up with people, with stuff. And when I got a bit of weight about it, I went looking for
top speed of 65 kilometres an hour?
Well, I went looking for some 0 to 100 kilometre times for the original Kombis. And they said most of the time they didn't make it to 100.
No data.
Unless it was a hill. And so my brother found that he actually rolled one down a hill.
Yeah, no, they weren't the most aerodynamic or stable sort of vehicles.
Well, when we heard the story that our brother had rolled this, then we thought there was going to be an ugly scene with people in it, bounced around, everyone got out alive and a few bruises and all the rest of it. But I reckon that was the fastest that Kombi van ever went, rolling down the hill. So
my grandfather drove a Kombi from Sydney to London. So they put it on ferries and got it into Asia and Europe, drove through Afghanistan in the 60s there, and we got all the slideshow for that. But, it was quite an amazing feat. They were a resilient car. Volkswagens were always built to last.
They were, and just a simple...
Like a Meccano set.
That's right, and they were simple, but obviously they got to the stage where the world had moved on, and by 2013 they said Kombi is no more. The last one rolled off the production line.
Yeah, so we're not calling these Kombis anymore.
No.
So the hipsters are going to have a real, they're going to have a bottom out there. They're not going to like this at all.
They can call them Kombis, that's okay. So I'm sure you get away with
They
it.
don't quite look like a Kombi. They've got a nose on them though.
And imagine having a head-on collision in the original Kombi. Your feet were about 3 millimetres of steel from what was outside you, so it would have been a bit ugly. So they have made them a bit better.
They've got a VW feel about them, but they've got a bit of a nose on them, and you need that if you're an EV. You've got to get some sort of streamlining. You can't be pressing
I thought that was more
into
for safety. I just thought you need some sort of crumple zone because the old ones, the crumple zone was your legs, whereas these ones have got a bit of a crumple zone. So they've got a bit of a different styling. They call it the ID.Buzz. They launched a concept car in 2017 and it went off. People went, yes, we want this. It's taken them now 8 years to go from concept to the actual final vehicle.
Yeah, right.
But a couple of different versions, a two-wheel drive version, a four-wheel drive version. Now remember, 18 kilowatts and maybe 0 to 100 time in 45 seconds, the original ones. This now, the rear-wheel drive has got 210 kilowatts and 0 to 107.6 seconds. The four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive version, dual motors, 250 kilowatts, 6 second, 0 to 100.
Oh, wow.
So it's not meant to be a performance vehicle, but you just can't help.
It's almost a supercar.
That's right. You just can't help do it, can you? I'd love to get my brother in one of these and go, how's this compared to your old Kombi ad? So they have tried to keep that retro styling, but you're right, it's got a bit of a nose on it now, so it's a bit different, but it's still that boxy style shape.
Yeah, and that's something that the people love.
Yeah, that's right. And that was the feedback they got from the concept car. It's got a 91 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion battery, so good for a range of about 370 kilometres. So not the best range on the market, but again, I imagine that someone that's driving this is not trying to get from A to B really quickly.
Yeah.
They're taking their time, they're touring around, they're loading it up, might be surfboards, as you say, might be campers. Actually, one of the things that happened with the old Kombis was the number of accessories that came out, things you could hang off it on the roof rack, out to the side, a whole range of things. People made them into homes, but then you'd pack up and off you'd go. So I'm sure
it became a real touring van.
It did. I'm sure something similar would happen with this. I don't know whether the market is going to be old Kombi drivers who love their old Kombi or people that have got an SUV now and go, well, I want something a bit more flexibility than my SUV. I don't need that shape. I'd rather the Kombi shape. But
well, they want to try something that Granddad or great-granddad was driving through Afghanistan.
Yeah, maybe that. But I actually think it's great. I think taking the EV, the modern concept of an EV with all the advantages of that, and this has got to be safer, not just the crumple zone, but again, all the weight down the bottom with the batteries, because the old one was a bit easy to tip over because it was a fairly high centre of gravity, didn't go well on the wind, side winds were a bit dangerous for them, but now with all that weight down low, it's probably going to handle better. So taking all that we know in terms of modern technology and applying that to an old retro style, I think it's going to be popular. I don't know when they'll be available in Australia, but certainly they'll be going off across Europe, I can imagine.
But get ready for it, folks. just cannot hold back progress, folks. In the world of gadgetry, things get faster and better as a habit, and HDMI connections are set to do just that. But we all know about how frustrating it is when the plugs change, rendering the old stuff to our bottom drawers full of those unusable relics. People, if you're still playing your music from an iPod with a 30-pin Apple plug, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Matt, we cannot stop progress, but the bottom drawer is full. What's going to happen with HDMI 2.2?
You're going to need a new cable.
Ah!
If you want to take advantage of all the new features. But
yeah, right.
At least it will be able to plug into the normal socket if you've got a cable now, HDMI 2.1, for example. So you're not going to get all the new advantages. And what are the new advantages? Well, there's competition. DisplayPort and HDMI are competing just like VHS and Betamax used to compete in video cassettes.
Okay.
And they're trying to outdo each other. They're trying to leapfrog each other. So HDMI 2.2 has come out now. HDMI 2.1, 48 gigabits per second. On the 6th of January, 2.2 was announced, and the speed is double that, 96 gigabits per second. So fantastic. What do we do with all that speed? What can it help us with? Well, you can do 4K, so you plug in your TV, for example, 4K, not that big a deal, but 4K at 480 hertz. Now, that's better than TVs are offering at the moment, which is exactly what you want. You want it to be ahead of what's capable out there. You could do 8K at 240 hertz. You can even do 10K at 120 hertz. Now, when you compare that to DisplayPort 2.1, well, DisplayPort is at 80 gigabits per second, so now this has jumped over it, and DisplayPort will do up to 16K at 60 hertz.
Now, so it's good data, but what does that mean? I mean, I can watch a movie on a television using the HDMI cable that I've already got.
Correct. Now, when you go and buy a new device, it might be a new Apple TV, it might be a new streaming device, for example, then when you plug that in, it might be HDMI 2.2. Use your same cable, it'll still send that data at the limit of that cable.
Yeah.
But then if you buy a new cable, and again, this is assuming your TV's at the new standard, your streaming devices at the new standard, and then your cable at the new standard, then it will be able to send that information faster. Yeah. Now, what we're going to do with that is get our TVs with high resolutions, with better refresh rates, and then we want that data to come across faster. So it's all about that speed.
Yeah.
I imagine that you'll probably be looking at gamers and videographers more so than just catch up with a movie from last year.
Yeah, right.
And someone with a complete home cinema setup that's got a huge screen, that's got the absolute latest in everything there, certainly that's going to be important for them as well, so they get that utmost quality. But I think gamers, the refresh rate is really about you making sure that when you see someone about to shoot you, you can shoot them back before they shoot you, and the refresh rate helps you see that in terms of those refresh rates. But we start to get to the limits of the human body. We start to get the limits of our eyes. We've talked about it before.
Yeah.
When you start to go from HD to 4K to 8K, it really only matters when you start getting a TV that's so big that the pixels become relevant, because when we sit there with a normal sized TV in the lounge room, our eyes just haven't got the resolution.
Yeah.
If we have a pet eagle, maybe they go, oh, I like that 8K TV better than the 4K with their superior eyesight. But with our eyesight, we're at the limitation. A bit the same with the refresh rate. Our human capabilities are probably not up to the standard that can make a difference to some of these, but we'll keep pursuing them regardless because we want to keep selling new products.
So I'm wondering, with new technology developing and becoming more readily accessible, we've got super high-speed cameras now that can take, well, I know there's some that can do 1 million frames per second, but let's say 100,000 frames per second now. That's a super high-speed camera. Yeah. So that's requiring a lot of data to feed across an HDMI cable potentially. Yeah. And this is an application for it. More and more people are getting their hands on this sort of technology, I assume, and so this is a way that they can manage that sort of stuff?
It's just anything that needs more data, more speed, more information. So
CGI is also picking up as well, so I wonder if that's got something to do with it perhaps, maybe?
Yeah, look, it is always about pushing the boundaries, and then sometimes they'll say, hey, here's a cable that can do 96 gigs per second, and someone says, oh, thank goodness, I've got this other device over here that I've been trying to work out how I can make that, and the limitation has been that damn 48 gigs per second. Now I can go 96. Well, fantastic. So sometimes that does happen with technology, but I imagine things that are involving high-end, high-spec resolutions with video information is where you're talking about. So whether it be very high-speed cameras you talk about, whether it be CGI, whether it be, again, gaming. Gaming, there's a big market in gaming, and so trying to produce better products for gaming is a big part of all of this. I mean, there is a minor problem in that a HDMI 2.1 cable is classified technically as an ultra-high-speed HDMI cable. I just don't know what the name's going to be for double that. Is it a double ultra? I mean, we need to come up with a name and then put it out there.
What's bigger than ultra?
That's right. Super ultra. I mean, we need some sort of SI standard in naming here.
Yeah.
If it was small, we'd go nano ultra, but that wouldn't make a lot of sense. So we need to have some name so that we can just roll off the tongue and go.
And mega doesn't even sound big enough.
Yeah, I don't know which is bigger, mega or ultra. I mean,
well, they're two different scales, but mega just doesn't sound big enough on that scale.
It doesn't sound as big, does it? No. So that's a problem that hasn't been addressed. They made the announcement, but they didn't address that. They didn't say what they're going to call the HDMI 2.2 cables. So,
that's the real dilemma.
That's right. Forget about all the other stuff. That's the real dilemma.
Here's your chance to grab a free copy of the latest Tech Talk compilation book in 3 easy steps. Step 1. Listen to any Tech Talk episode, like this one right now. Step 2. Leave a review on your favourite podcast app. Step 3. Email a screenshot of your review to freebook@techtalk.digital with your name and address. The first 20 emails each week until the end of January 2025 will each receive a free book. Don't wait. You are listening to this podcast right now. Leave a review and send that screenshot to freebook@techtalk.digital. Tech Talk, your weekly gateway to the tech world.
Now, how many of us have an uncle that can predict the weather with his dodgy knee? Well, of course you do. Uncles with dodgy weather predicting knees are a dime a dozen. Well, in an interesting flip on this theme, AI is going to be using knee x-rays now, trying to decode people's diet history. Now, Matt, my question is can AI pick up whether Uncle Bob likes beers and or burritos just from his knee x-ray, and is diet likely to affect the accuracy of his weather forecast?
Well, I can't answer the second one.
Okay.
But I will answer the first one in that AI thinks it can, but I don't think it can.
That talks a big game.
It does. And so that's exactly what they did. They've been feeding information to AI just to see how it goes with what seems like random information to see if it can make sense of that. So they fed...
But they've chosen the knee joint to x-ray. This is an interesting thing. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Why not? I don't know why.
I guess it's one that gets worked a lot.
Possibly. And I did think maybe...
And so it needs to be fed, and it's going to be subject to things that you've put into your body.
Well, correct, but they were trying to come up with something where they were seemingly not related, but maybe beer consumption and knee x-rays are related, because maybe if you drink too many beers, you end up with larger knee joints because it's carrying more weight around with that. But basically what they did was they said, we want to feed it ridiculous information and see what it comes up with, because humans, and it is a problem for researchers, but humans have worked out that correlation doesn't imply causation.
Yeah.
But AI doesn't get that. And so they looked at all these x-rays and they said you've got different x-ray models, or like the x-ray equipment. You've got different markers in different x-ray machines. You've got different time frames these x-rays were taken. So it might have been taken over several years. So you've got all these variables, but they were able, or AI was able to predict with a 0.73, so 73% accuracy to say the level of beer, high levels of beer consumption, if you like, from x-rays. Now, the researchers said there wasn't that link there, but this is both the fear of AI and the potential power of AI.
Yeah, okay.
So on one side, you might go, well, that's ridiculous. Knee x-rays are never going to tell you how much beer someone drinks, so what a ridiculous concept. We all know that as humans. But maybe when you feed a lot of information to AI, it comes up with links that you then go, actually, there is a link there, and we never would have seen that because we just can't ingest that much information.
So what we're saying is that AI has got the potential to pick up a whole lot of correlation. It's then up to the humans to decide causation.
At the moment, yes.
But we wouldn't even see the correlation if AI wasn't picking
correct,
up on it.
That's right. And to go back to the correlation and causation, the simplest example I've always used when people ask me about that is I think about ice cream sales increase in January in Australia. Drownings increase in January in Australia. Therefore, ice cream sales cause drowning. Yeah. And that's the link there. Now, obviously,
there's a similar thing about Nicolas Cage movies and murder rates in San Francisco or something like that,
Right.
you know? And so correlation there.
And in that case, there is something causing ice cream sales to go up and something that causes drownings to go up, and that's called summer.
Yeah.
And January is the hottest month, and so people are out there eating more ice creams and people are out there swimming more, which means more people drown. So there isn't a link between ice cream sales and drownings. But if you looked at the data, and that's what AI would possibly look at and go, hold on, I've noticed
Ice creams are causing drownings.
That's right.
Or drownings are causing more ice creams to be eaten.
Well, maybe it goes back to when your mum said, don't go and swim for an hour after eating, and you eat an ice cream, then you go and swim and you drown. So apologies to anyone out there that's had anyone that's drowned. Of course, I'm making a lot of a subject, but essentially that correlation and causation is a real challenge for any researcher. But for AI, it doesn't have that logical step, if you like. It just goes, oh, that and that equals this. And so look at that. And this is where the researchers are really trying to work out what sort of trivial variables can actually give us some information that's relevant, and what stuff do we throw out, and then trying to work out, can we teach AI to put those links together? So look at your x-rays, look at beer consumption. Can you understand they're not related, but maybe you're finding some other information that might be of some relevance there. Look at enough x-rays of knees, and maybe you'll find something where you can predict someone that might have bone cancer down the track. Maybe there is a link there, maybe there isn't. But just feeding AI so much data, I think, is where the real secret here is. But we've got to be careful that we don't just start to get rubbish information coming back because we're not putting some sort of logic behind it. Once you find the data there, is there a logical link?
Yeah,
That's
the causation, and that's the really tricky part, and demonstrating causation.
Yeah, so interesting research is being done. The technical term for it is shortcut learning, and that's where AI makes prediction with things that just seem unrelated. So it shortcuts their learning by going, we'll link beer consumption, x-rays, done, and sometimes that's completely wrong, but sometimes it might be right.
Yeah, I wonder what we'll pick up out of this. It's probably not something you've spent a lot of time considering, but do you have any idea just how many plastic research buoys, if you're listening in America, I'd say buoy, but research buoys are dropped into the ocean annually? And then what happens to them when they're no longer needed? Well, it may not surprise you that this aspect of ocean research hasn't been an entirely ecologically kosher practice up to this point. So, in a bid to make Antarctic ocean research a little more environmentally friendly, research buoys may be made from Tasmanian timber in the future. Matt, here's a much more sustainable alternative to adding to the great ocean garbage tip.
I reckon there'll be some of those boys out there that will be researching how much rubbish there is in the ocean. And they're contributing to that. But thousands of plastic and fiberglass buoys.
There's literally thousands of these things.
Annually.
And look, they're supposed to drift with the ocean currents and help us map things like the Great Ocean Heat Conveyor and whatnot. But, thousands of these things.
That's right. And they can be used for a whole range of different research. But I didn't think there'd be that many that we'd need to deploy each and every year. So you're right. They're plastic. That's not great. And they stay. They're made of things that are pretty hardy, like plastic and fiberglass. They'll stay there. And if they did start to break down, then they'll probably break down into microplastic, which isn't great in the ocean as well. So why not use timber? Timber naturally will break down. And I imagine that you've got some electronics in there still. So you've got a battery. That battery might last a couple of years, for example. You've got an antenna. You'd have some sort of circuit board. So there are things in there that still aren't going to break down. But I imagine that the whole idea here is that the timber, which is estimated to last about 10 years before it breaks down to the point where it's no longer of any use. It's not floating anymore. That breaks down. And then I imagine that the electronics that are in there sink to the bottom of the ocean, where presumably they're better than floating around on the top of the ocean. So it's not perfect. When I thought about it, okay, you don't have this buoy sitting around, floating around there, but you've still got the electronic part of it there, which isn't going to break down. But surely on the bottom of the ocean is better than sitting around on the top of the ocean. I guess.
So and you've got less volume of this stuff anyway.
Correct. Once that timber breaks down. So they've found Akoya wood. Never heard of Akoya wood, but ACCOYA. Akoya wood is known for its durability because it's out there exposed to the elements, but they're estimating about 10 years they'll be able to get out of one of these buoys. They make them a bit like when you cut up an orange, and it basically then locks together like that. So you don't want to use a bunch of glues that then mightn't be good for the environment. So you put the electronics inside there, fold it all together, and off you go, launch your buoy. And then a couple of years later, the batteries run out, it's finished its job. 10 years later, that's broken down and it's down at the bottom of the ocean. So it's a good step forward because we want to keep getting this research. And I think probably now more than ever, things like ocean temperature, that's a pretty important one that we might want to keep a bit of a track of to see what's happening as our climate keeps changing. So good move, I think, by researchers.
Yeah. If you're one to succumb to motion sickness at all, we've got some technology for a timely remedy for you. Now, motion sickness tends to result from times when the motion that your body feels isn't matched with what your eyes are seeing. Focusing on the horizon can alleviate seasickness because your peripheral vision then gives you a better sense of the rocking of the boat on the waves. Looking into the middle distance out the window as your car winds through a windy mountain pass should do the same thing. But Matt, some clever cookies think that they might have a solution on your iPhone.
And this obviously applies to passengers only, not to the driver. But I don't find many drivers get car sick.
No.
I think it's part of that process
And
where...
that's because you're constantly looking into the middle distance and whatnot.
Yeah, so I imagine that's part of it. It's exactly as you said, that your body feels something different to what your eyes are seeing. And so, I mean, when I was a kid, if I'd sit down and try and read a comic book, I could do that for a little while and I'd start to feel a bit sick. So then I'd sit up and I'd look around as I drove for a while. And then
feel better.
Yeah, that's right.
And some people are a lot more susceptible than others. Yeah. You've got to grant that. But with seasickness, you're on a boat. And if everything around you is still, but your body's sensing this motion of rocking, then that is too confusing for your brain, and that's what sets you off.
Yeah.
So looking out on the horizon is one way that you can help yourself with that. It's not foolproof. Some people are still going to get sick, but it will solve some people's problems.
Yeah, and so what Apple have done is they've come up with a concept where they've got vehicle motion cues, CUES. And the idea here is it puts some dots, and I've actually tried it, I've played around with it, and it puts some dots around the edge of your phone. And as your phone moves, in other words, it's moving around a corner, accelerating, decelerating, those dots move in the same method as the car. So in other words, you're watching your phone screen. If you're just doing that normally, trying to read something or do some emails, whatever it might be on your phone, you're looking at something that's still, and again, your body knows you're moving. But when you're looking at the phone and the dots are moving, so they're giving you a sense of motion. You go around a corner to the right, the dots move to the right. So your eyes go a bit across, the dots just catch your eye with the rest of the information that's on the screen.
It only requires your peripheral vision, really, too. Not your focal vision, the one where you're trying to centre on things. So anything that's sort of happening there gives you that sense of motion.
Correct, and that's exactly what it does. So you've got the normal screen with whatever you're doing on the screen, and the dots just appear down the side of the screen. So they're kind of over the top of what's on there, but they're just small. So they're just in the corner of your eye. Yeah. You're not looking at them per se, but they do. And I just tried it even just sitting at my desk and just moving the phone from side to side quickly, and you see those dots just move off to the side or up and down, simulating acceleration or deceleration. I haven't tried it in a car. I don't get car sick, so I'm not a good test subject to actually try it on. But I think obviously Apple's not going to launch a product like this until they've done a bit of research, and you can imagine the ad they would have put out. We need people that get car sick to come and test this. Our bags are provided, vomit bags are provided for the trip. And you almost want to do that. Okay, we'll take you for a trip around this circuit and make sure you get sick, make sure you feel sick. Now we'll try with this to see if it feels any better. So it wouldn't have been a fun testing process to go through, I can imagine. But I'm sure they've done that testing to see if it actually works. At this stage, Android doesn't have a similar feature, but it's very unusual for the two big competitors, iOS and Android, to come out with a product or a feature that isn't then copied by the other one. So I imagine it won't be long before Android comes out with something very similar. But I'd be interested if people have used it, people that do get car sick or their kids get car sick, and they've actually used this, send through an email to ask@techtalk.digital and just tell us whether or not you found this particular one effective. It's only available in iOS 18, but for anyone that's got a reasonably modern iPhone, they can use iOS 18. But just something, it's good to see lots of problems are being solved, if you like, by technology.
Yeah, they're a really interesting use of technology there and very innovative. Digital license plates became a thing back in 2018 overseas, But due to government restrictions, they still are yet to hit Australian shores. So they look pretty sleek from what I gather, but as you may guess, they've left a gaping hole for hackers to play for some meddlesome tricks. Is that right, Matt?
It is right, but I want to go back and look at license plates a little bit. I like to get a bit of research done and a bit of history on different things, and this one piqued my interest. The first license plates appeared back in France in 1893. There weren't many vehicles around in 1893,
right.
and so you can imagine they go, there's James's car and there's Matthew's car, because there would have been so few cars around, you would have known exactly who owned each car. But they thought maybe license plates are a good idea, and so Germany followed not long after. And then in 1900 in Australia, Victoria was the first state to adopt them, and then the UK, the US. Pretty much by 1910 across this nation we had license plates, and more importantly, prisons started manufacturing license plates. And that's been a practice that's happened around the world for, since 1910, essentially. So in Australia, overseas, prisons are the manufacturers of license plates. It's a good thing for prisoners to be involved in, to give them some work to do during the days, and something that I'm not sure why they chose that particular item, but it seems like a good, sensible one. But when we jump forward to now, as you said, license plates, digital in 2018. Michigan, California, Arizona all started doing digital license plates. And I thought, is there any point? Like, it's not that big a deal about a license plate. It's not something you're changing on a daily basis. So I didn't think it was essential.
And anyone who's trying to read a license plate just needs something that is clear and easily read. How do you enhance that digitally? Or is the digital purpose to put in some other nifty little animations and things that are happening around, which would be otherwise distracting?
Well, they could be otherwise distracting, but I think that's one of the things they put forward. When they talk about digital license plates, and I read up some of those states in terms of what they were doing, they talk about the fact that it's easy when you change car registration, but that might happen every 3 or 4 years. So it's not that big a deal to undo a couple of screws and swap over number plates.
Yeah.
But anyway, that seems like an advantage. But you can also have other information on those plates. So, for example, if a car was stolen, it can display an alert. You can actually, get ready for it, and this is only in America surely, you can actually have advertising that appears on number plates.
Yeah.
So,
and that becomes a distraction, I think.
it does become a distraction, but that's one of the things that they do. So a car owner can actually make some money out of their license plates by having advertising there. Now, when you think about it, you don't need a license plate to be seen all the time. When you're going past a speed camera, when a police car wants to look at it, there's certain times you need it, but it doesn't matter most of the time. So having advertising on there is probably okay. But one of the concerns, of course, is that one company said that let's have a look to see if we can hack these number plates, these license plates, because obviously anything that's electronic, anything that's connected to the outside world has got the potential to be hacked. So they did hack it. Now, one of the things they did say is we've been able to hack it, and we actually then displayed the license plate of hacked just to prove our point and just to show how clever we were. To do it, they did need to get physical access to it. So you kind of think, well, it's not as if they can take over every license plate across the US or across every state that's got it from some basement computer sitting down there in some foreign country. You've got to get physical access to it. But it's probably not a good thing that you can hack it regardless. And maybe this is step one. I think they're trying to say, aren't we a clever company that we managed to hack it? But also, this is a risk as you go forward. I haven't heard any. Have you heard any talk at all from our governments around Australia to say they've looked at this?
Yeah, the first thing that I knew about digital number plates was this story.
Yeah, so I don't know that we've even looked at it. I mean, it's been around for 6 years, 7 years now across the world, but I don't know we've looked at it and said this is something we really want to do.
Certainly no one jumping up and down saying, why haven't we got digital number plates and when are we going to get them?
And you want a compelling reason. To make a change like that, you want a compelling reason. The manufacturers would have to have something, or would have to go and screw something else in separate anyway. So that's a change, which would be a bit of a hassle to do. Yeah. So I don't know that it'll take off, but if they're going to have them hacked on a regular basis, it may not take off at all. So keep an eye out for that one. It's an interesting concept and a bit of technology that I'm scared to say this, but not convinced that we actually need.
Now, you may have heard of a child's robot, and it's called Moxie. It's a bit of a toy here. Released back in 2020 with a human-like face, it was marketed at children as a cute way to interact with technology, build cognitive skills, and learn social cues. But Moxies all around the world are set to go silent as the pin is pulled on its cloud-based resources. Matt, it looks like Moxie is about to become a nostalgic paperweight, but there are lessons to be learned here, surely.
And there's been some very upsetting videos that have been posted by people where they've said to their kids, Moxie's not going to be with you anymore
Moxie's
because
died.
they formed a relationship. Because Moxie is a bit like a AI tool that you can chat to, you can ask questions, you can
But it's
tell
got
jokes.
this human-like face.
It's got the human-like
So
face,
it gives
and
it something endearing.
that's right. But it talks to you. It has a conversation with you. It plays games with you. If you're bored, you can start to ask trivia questions of it. I mean, a whole range of things like you can do with any AI tool. And the concept was good. The concept was we've got this tool, this device, and it just uses the AI devices that are out there at the moment, but it needed its own server farm, its own cloud environment to work in, which has been fine until some investors said, we think this isn't really going that well. We're going to pull our funding. Therefore, paying for those servers in the cloud server farm isn't going to keep happening. Therefore, Moxie is now a toy that sits there that's lifeless because you need that back-end environment. And so we've seen things before where it might have worked independent of any external connections, and then the external connections gave you some additional features. But every feature it had was via a link to the outside world.
Right.
So parents
big
have
lesson
been
to be learned there.
That's right. Parents have been saying to their kids, "Sorry, Moxie's going to be no more. Say goodbye. Give it a hug." And how do you explain to a kid?
Or at least Moxie will be there. He just won't talk to you.
He won't talk to you anymore. That's right. Can we keep Grandma the same? Keep her in the lounge room because she's so lovely. So, and this is the challenge: explain to a child about your dog dying or your grandparent dying or Moxie dying in inverted commas. That's all a bit of a challenge. And I don't know that just explaining that the connection's gone but the physical body's still there is the right way to explain
And it's
death.
really, it was a toy marketed to younger kids,
absolutely.
5-year-olds and whatnot. So,
Yeah. So some people have gone from the age of 5, maybe starting school, maybe they're getting through to the end of primary school now and they're ready to retire Moxie.
Moxie,
How am I going to do my homework now? I haven't got Moxie there to ask some of these hard questions of. So it's a bit of a thing. I remember seeing Spotify, we did talk about it, the car thing, and that was that little hardware product that basically allowed you to access Spotify from the car, a bit like a radio, but it needed an external connection, and they brought that out and a bunch of fanfare, and they then said, no, it's not working so well, so they made that obsolete. So you do get various products sometimes that come out and they need that external connection, and then it's gone, and that device is just an expensive bit of technology sitting in the cupboard.
a new
maybe.
paperweight.
So anyway, sad to see all those kids out there with Moxie. There'll be something else that'll come along and replace it, I'm sure. But maybe just go and talk to
And
ChatGPT in the
with the
meantime.
lessons that we've learned from Moxie, thank you, Moxie, for your efforts.
Yeah, exactly right.
And that stumps for today, folks. The umpires have pocketed the bails, and it's time to head back to the change rooms while the groundsman drags out the covers. Nice start to the year, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm just going to give you a quick little couple of predictions for the year. I have this silly thing I do. I make a New Year's resolution every year to say I'm not going to write one of my columns on predictions for the new year because it's just so hard with technology to get it right. And the stat shows that about 80% of New Year's resolutions fail before February. And so the next year rolls around, I go, I know what I'll do. I'll write a column about what's going to happen this year. And I go, I remember last year I resolved not to do this ever again. But here are I've got a top 5, if you like, about things that I think will happen over this year. And they're pretty broad in general. One of them is that I think AI will see some real regulation. We've seen a bit of regulation with AI, but I think AI is rushing ahead so quickly, we need to see regulation. And so I think we'll see that. I think governments across the world will start to say, you know what, we need to have something in place. So I can't tell you what it will look like, but I think that will see some real regulation. That's number one. Number two, renewable tech will start to look a bit different. Now, sure, we've got solar panels on the roof of our house and we've got big wind turbines out there in fields, but I think we'll start to see maybe vertical wind turbines on houses, maybe modular solar panels that are integrated into buildings. I just think we'll see other ways.
What's going to happen with tidal or wave technology? I'd like to see what's going to happen on our coastlines there.
So exactly that. I think renewable tech, as we know it today, by the end of this year, will start to look a bit different, and we'll see other ways it will generate power because it's not going away. People that think we're going to go back and start burning coal are dreaming. We're going to have different ways of producing power. It's not going to be the same way as it is now, and I think this year is where it will really start to happen. Number 3 is about wearables. Wearables will be more than just telling us what's happening. about our body. I think they'll take an active role in health management. So real-time interventions, changing your exercise plan based on stress levels or what you've been doing, changing your exercise
An electric
plan.
shock to get you into action, to get you out of the lounge chair.
Maybe to keep that New Year's resolution going. Maybe you're on holidays and so it changes your exercise plan and gives you suggestions. I just think wearables will start to be our guardians more so than just monitoring things. Maybe I'm dreaming on this one, but smart homes will start to be real. The house we're sitting in right now, where the studio is, was built 25 years ago, and I built it with a whole concept with a bunch of relays. It's clippable C-bus is what I used, a bunch of relays you control electronically. I didn't have a smartphone 25 years ago, but I could control them all via a computer, control them remotely, and then smartphones came along and that got integrated into it. I love the idea of a smart home. I can control everything in this home, the sprinklers, the lights, the heating, everything from a smartphone from anywhere in the world, and I just love the idea of that. And so number 4, which I'm not that confident in, but smart homes will start to become real. We've seen a lot of devices out there so far. Interoperability between the different companies hasn't been great. I just think we need to get some way to make – the concept is great, but we just don't seem to have really taken off. And I know when I put all these relays in for the C-bus system we've got in this house, I thought, wow, everyone will be doing this. You know, every home will be built like this. But it just hasn't happened yet. And it's certainly easier to build from the ground up than it is to retrospectively do it. But I think that will start to happen. And the last thing is flying cars. We've kind of been close, and there's kind of a few ones out there. I do apologise to Seth Century. He wrote his song about Dear Science. He wants his hoverboard. I don't think we're going to get the hoverboard by the end of the year. But flying cars definitely are going to be taking off, excuse the pun. They're going to be taking off this year. And we've seen a few around. We've seen some trials. We've seen some places where we've had limited ability for flying. And when I say flying car, I'm probably talking about more the flying taxi concept. But I just think we're going to get to the stage by the end of this year that'll be something that will be much more available and more in a large city, getting you from the airport into the city, that type of thing. But I just think we'll start to see some of these flying around our skies.
And so no mission to Mars or return to the moon on your list?
I did look at some things around space. But some of those things are happening already, I suppose, and I want to keep it things that people would interact with on a maybe not daily basis, but things that we would interact with, all those things there, I think we're going to interact with at some point in time.
I'm looking forward to the flying cars.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've been listening to Tech Talk with Matthew Dickerson. Thanks for looking us up again in 2025 for the latest and greatest in the world of science and technology. I'm your host, James Eddy. Don't forget to check in once again next week for our next episode. Now, I'm no soothsayer, but I have a feeling that the next 12 months are going to see some big steps forward, as Matthew's just pointed out, as we hurtle headlong into the future. And, of course, you'll always get the good oil right here. See you again next week.